This is part 2 of Shelley's story. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I recommend starting there first. Welcome to Unspoken Lives, the podcast that uncovers the powerful, untold stories of everyday people. The real stories you don't always hear, but ones that deserve to be told. I'm your host, Kelsey Billingsley. In each episode, we'll explore journeys of growth, resilience, and transformation. Conversations with guests who have faced challenges, embraced change, and discovered new purpose along the way. Through their stories, you'll find inspiration, hope, and a reminder that every life has a story worth telling. Let's dive into this next unspoken life. So 5 of them, one obviously is your daughter. Were any after she was born?
Yes,
Okay.
I often say she's an older sister and a younger sister.
Aw.
She has one older sibling in heaven and 3 younger siblings in heaven.
I'm sorry, but she'll get to meet them all.
Yes. Well, and it was interesting because as she's going through confirmation and as she was speaking with her sponsor, I had never connected it, but her sponsor was like, well, you should write about your testimony and your walk in faith and things like that. And talking about how she has siblings looking down and praying for her.
Oh, man.
That they're her guardian angel, right?
I would have lost it.
I was not expecting that. So I was like, okay, that's a great story.
But that also shows you, I'm sure she knows that because of your family, but also the work you do. I'm sure it's even more impactful for her to see how you're helping others and talk about it. You know, it's hard to talk about, but it's not something you shy away from talking about, which is important.
She definitely knows that she's an older sister and a younger sister. We, at one point in time when she was younger, we allowed her to name the babies. Unfortunately, I don't remember what those names were, but they were all girls. They might change now. If she had a different decision, maybe she'd want some brothers. I don't know. But what was interesting was her connection to these babies, because that last pregnancy, she had said something to me about having a baby or being pregnant. And I remember thinking, well, that's kind of odd, because she was 5 years old. She was in kindergarten when that last one happened. And she said something, and I thought, that's weird. And like 2 days later, I found out I was pregnant. It's almost like she instinctively knew I was pregnant. And so that pregnancy, it was very traumatic, because I had thought that I wasn't going to be pregnant ever again. I'd come to terms with we were stopping, and I unexpectedly, joyfully got pregnant, and then went through ups and downs with that pregnancy, because by the time I got to the doctor, they were like, we think you're going to miscarry. So 2 weeks up and down, I had test scores, or my betas were up and down, up and down.
Man.
Before the last beta test, my daughter came to me, and she came to my stomach. I remember we were at church, and she said, bye-bye, like saying bye-bye to the baby. And I was like, what? So I know that there's a connection to her with those babies in heaven.
Wow.
But it was interesting to see how connected she was, even at a little child. At 5 years old, she had no idea what she was doing.
Yeah, and kids aren't going to make something up at that point. Like, it's coming from somewhere. How has all of this changed the way you look at grief or loss?
I often speak with my clients about how grief is not linear. I have 2 visualizations that I generally use with grief to represent grief. If you can imagine like a circle, and that there's a bouncy ball in that circle. With grief, you have 5 stages. It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Okay.
And if you can imagine like a circle with a bouncy ball, that it just bounces in between all of those stages. And if I write it down on a piece of paper, then you can see the messiness of grief. So I often work in that, and then talking about, I changed, and this was one of the things that I learned in therapy. I remember having this conversation with my therapist, telling her, I don't like the word acceptance, because acceptance kind of entails to me, or, means to me that you accept it.
You're okay with it.
You're okay with it, and then you move on. And it's not really like that with grief. So I like to say that peace is that stage.
I like that.
Because you learn to live with it as a part of you, like a scar that
Right.
becomes on your body, right?
You
I
always
often
have it.
talk about infertility scars that my clients will have. Sometimes it gets open and it cuts and it bleeds, and sometimes it's just there. And that's kind of what grief does. I also talk about the ocean, that grief comes in waves. And sometimes you can look out and see how big the wave is going to be, and you can prepare for it.
Yep.
And then sometimes you've got your face, your face towards your belongings to see if they're still there, and a big, huge wave comes
You're
and
knocked
just
in the
takes you.
ground. Yep. That's a good way of looking at it. We've talked about, obviously, this has all inspired you to get into counseling, but you said you were in HR before. At what point did you decide, no, I'm not doing that? Like, what did that journey look like?
So I went to college and I got a speech degree. And when I graduated college, I went into the human resources world, worked there in corporate America until I got pregnant. And then when I got pregnant, my husband and I decided that I was going to stay at home.
Okay.
And so I stayed at home. And during the time that I was trying to get pregnant, I was doing counseling. And I was
going to your own.
Going to my own counseling. Yeah, not studying to be a counselor, but going to my own counseling and seeing like the fruits of the labor of that. And I was a part of several support groups and had often been asked to lead some of those groups. And I took my space and had my good boundaries like a therapist. And I wasn't able to lead them. But it was interesting and really special. I'd always wanted to go back to school to do something. I just didn't know what. But then when my daughter was 2, my sister, who is significantly younger than me, had decided that she wanted to go back to school. She had gotten a psychology degree in undergrad, and she had decided she wanted to go and get her master's in counseling. And I was like, I've been asked to lead because people found comfort in talking to me. And then I want to do something else in higher education. And so I went back to school with her and decided that I would be an infertility counselor. A counselor that focused on infertility because I'd had a hard time finding a counselor that had that specialty, right? And I wanted to be a Christian counselor. And to find those two, it was God's blessing that I was able to find my counselor that had that, because there's not a whole lot out there. There might be more now. But that's what drove me to go back to school and be where I am today. And I can see, I run a counseling business that I see clients for depression, anxiety, stress management, all that stuff. But my heart lies in what I would say women's issues, from trying to get pregnant all the way through parenting.
Right.
Because sometimes one of the experiences that I had was having a hard time with that new mom stage, but then feeling guilt because I wanted to be a new mom.
Got it.
Right? Like I'd been through infertility, that I didn't give myself space to experience what it was like to be a new mom. So I like working with that
makes sense.
Group too.
Well, I feel like there's not much out there for people that are going through infertility or loss. I had a friend recently who had a miscarriage, and it was really hard on her. And I remember her telling me, like, even just going on Instagram, seeing all the happy families, and she has children, but going through all the happy families or pregnancies, and she would try to find something about miscarriage or something that she could just relate to. And it just kept going down a wormhole. And I actually remember sharing this podcast with her, and she's like, I wish there was something out there that I could have listened to during that time. So I wish I had had this conversation I could have sent to her. But what would you recommend for somebody maybe out there who is going through this right now and feels alone? What would you recommend to them?
Isolation is a big part of infertility because, I mean, we're talking about really private things. Trying to get pregnant,
right?
It's very private. We don't walk around talking about, like, we say, when are you going to have kids? But how we have kids is very private.
Right.
And so isolation is a huge part of it. Find a support group, counselor. I would say give yourself some grace and take the break, set a boundary with social media. If you need to, get off of it. I also, one of the things that I work with my clients on if you keep coming across and you're suffering with like having a miscarriage and people keep asking that question, come up with canned responses so you don't have to be put on the spot and think about, do I really tell someone how I'm feeling today, or do I?
It just comes out how you're prepared.
Like, I remember coming up with that on my own during my process. And I remember coming up with this idea of, when people are going to ask me if I'm having children, I'm going to tell them when God decides that I'm going to have children, because that was, it gave me peace saying that, because it was really in God's hands.
And it's true.
It's true. And I didn't have to, unfortunately, there's unintentional comments. People say, relax, go on vacation, right? Like those unintentional comments.
Gives me anxiety just thinking about that.
Yeah. And so you don't know what kind of emotion it might set off. You know, if you're having a good day and you're in the 2-week wait, you might respond very positively. Or if you've just gotten a negative pregnancy test, you might be very sensitive to that. So I encourage people to have canned responses for that, and that it's okay to take a break from people.
And I'd imagine if someone's at that age where they're having children, they probably have friends who are also at that age, and having friends getting pregnant and having kids, and then you're struggling with this, that could also be a little isolating in itself.
For sure. And it can change the friendship dynamic.
And you want to be happy for them, but then it must just be such a battle inside.
Yeah, the duality of that emotion. So we talk about, when I have clients talking about the duality of emotion, and that both of those can be true. And so setting boundaries of how do you honor that person and be excited for them, but then also honor the sadness that you're experiencing that goes along with that.
Yeah, that's good. Are there ways you've learned to hold hope for clients even when their journey looks different than they've expected? Like, how do you help them to see hope?
Oh, that is a good question. The reason I struggle with that is sometimes it's hard to hold that hope for them.
Yeah.
I had a client that we were very hopeful. She was 14 weeks pregnant. We thought we were in the home stretch.
Yeah.
And she found out that she was going to miscarry. It's hard to hold hope in those moments.
Yeah.
I think that I would answer that question more by saying I'm realistic with my clients.
Okay.
There's times to have hope, and there are times where it's hopeless. And so I just sit with them in that hopelessness. Does that make sense?
No, that's okay.
Like, I don't encourage, hey, stay in this place.
Right.
But I honor the space that they're in when they're at that moment in time.
And they need that.
Yeah. That's really the reality of it. As I think about that client that I was talking about, I mean, all I could do was sit there and say, hey, I'm here. I'm going to honor your feelings right now.
Yeah.
And that validation, having a space to not have to explain, not have to do anything, that just walk in and just be. Maybe that's where the hope is.
Yeah.
God is the hope, but also even in that, you don't want to, when people are hurting, they're hurting.
Yeah.
You just got to give a space for the hurt.
Yep. It's part of that circle you talked about.
Yes.
The grief, what do you call it? Grief circle?
Yeah, the grief circle. The circle of grief.
Yeah. We laugh about it, but I can picture it clearly in my mind and see that ball bouncing around, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, I'm sure.
Well, and you can experience a grief cycle. Anytime there's a loss or a disappointment, you probably go through a grief cycle. Some stick around longer than others, but I really encourage, if you ever think about it, draw a circle and take your pen and go through and just like bounce it around. Grief is messy.
Yeah. I was going to ask, do you only meet with people in person? Do you also do virtual?
I do.
Okay.
I have clients that I've only ever seen on virtual.
Okay.
And then I have clients that I've only ever seen in person. So.
Yeah. If someone wanted, maybe there's someone listening who is going through something and want to reach out to you, how would they find you?
They could go to my website, which is stephancounseling.com. That is STEPHAN counseling.com.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. I just think it's so important for people to have that support during hard times like this.
Absolutely. It's interesting because you have some people who don't want to hear hopeful stories, and you have some people that do want to hear hopeful stories, right? I think the one thing that I can say is, or that I encourage people to hold on to, is you do have control of your identity. in a situation where you don't have a whole lot of control over anything, the grief,
Yeah.
right? We didn't talk about this, so maybe I'll talk about it
Yeah.
right here, or all the different types of losses that you experience with infertility.
Okay.
You have a financial loss. You have grandparents that have a vision of
I didn't even think about that.
their grandchildren. You have changes in dynamics with your relationship with your husband. You have relationship changes with your friendships, maybe siblings. I mean, the list could go on. One of the biggest ones is the death potentially of what your future, what you dreamed your future would be. And that is really hard. So hold space for that as you're going through it. Amongst all of that, I just want people to know that, and this is what I really try to work with clients on, is gaining your control back in your thoughts.
Yeah.
In a situation where you feel like you don't have emotional control, you do. I often reference Inside Out. This is like one of my favorite movies. And if you come into my office, you'll see I have my Inside Out characters everywhere. But
which is your favorite emotion?
Well, I think they're all important.
That's a good counselor answer.
I was going to say that's a good counselor answer. I think both those movies. The second one was just as good as the first one, but I think what they show is each one of those emotions serves a role, and you can't have one emotion controlled.
Right.
Joy can't control sadness all the time. We need to experience the sadness. Anxiety can't control all of the time. And so I love that movie to show that we need to hold space for all of those emotions. But I also think that it gives a visualization of how we can control what emotion is in the driver's seat.
Right.
It's hard to learn, but that's why we have counselors.
Yep. I like that. I just think it's beautiful seeing, I mean, obviously painful and sad, seeing the journey you went through, but beautiful seeing how you turned the years of loss and hurt into now helping other women that have gone through that. And I know when we first spoke, that was something I really wanted to talk to you about, because as you know, the podcast is called Unspoken Lives. And I think about women out there going through infertility or going through loss, and they probably walk around and nobody knows it. It's not something you see. And so to just hear how you've taken all of that pain and now you're out helping these other women, even if they don't go to a counselor, maybe just listening to this podcast and realizing, you know, I'm not alone. I think it's beautiful. So I appreciate you sharing all of this and just sharing your journey with me.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah.
That is probably one thing that I can encourage clients, and I talk about this, is it's hard to go through the storm. It's hard to be in the middle of the storm. But if we do have the faith in God and we work through the trial and tribulation, God can do wonderful things.
Yeah.
And I am not happy that I had to go through that, to experience that. But I am so honored that I get to work with clients as they work through and navigate their journeys. But I wouldn't have understood that going through that. You know, you talk about the last miscarriage. I think I may have mentioned this, and if I didn't, then I'll mention it now. One of the biggest lessons that I learned from that baby was to never, ever forget what pain my client was experiencing as they were sitting across from me. And still to this day, like I said, the client that informed me that she was having a miscarriage at 14 weeks, my heart and my empathy for where she is, I can hold space for that.
Why do you think that last one was so impactful?
Because it was completely unplanned.
Okay.
I had given up any thought of ever being pregnant again. I had finally resolved, per se, and didn't ever think that I was going to be pregnant again. And I had all of the pregnancy symptoms, didn't know I was pregnant. And it was crushing to find out that I was pregnant. And then to go through 2 weeks of, I mean, gosh, I went through 2 weeks of beta tests, because one test would come back, the numbers would rise the next week, the next time it would lower, the next time it would rise. And it was up and down.
Roller coaster.
It was a roller coaster. It was very traumatic. And I remember being very angry at God and on my treadmill running and screaming, because I was home by myself, screaming at him like, how dare you do this? Right? Like I had resolved.
Yeah. I wasn't even trying. And now
I wasn't even trying. And then I got pregnant on my own. And you took that baby away from me. So it was very traumatic. Now, that was in 2018. So we're 8 years removed from that now.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that the purpose that that baby served is so that God could have me work with my clients.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first question I'm going to ask God when I get into heaven is why.
Yeah.
That was really
Yeah.
hurtful. That was
Yeah.
really painful.
I
But
wish I hadn't had that.
this is just in any trial or tribulation that you experience in your walk with God is. It's not that we can't have emotions with God. God was angry. He
Mm-hmm.
knows the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we choose to do with those emotions
Mm.
and what we choose to do with our struggles.
Right.
Do we choose to turn away from God or do we choose to allow him to work within that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I appreciate you sharing all of that. Again, I wish you didn't have to go through any of it, but I do know there's someone who needs to hear it, and you're an encouragement and a support for so many women. So,
Well, thank you so much for having me on here to share my journey
Yeah.
and let people hear
yeah,
another side of the story.
of course. You had shared with me that in the future you might start your own podcast on a similar topic. So when you do, let me know, because anyone who's listening to this, I'm sure would love to hear that.
Yeah, you can share that. I don't know when it's going to happen, but
Yeah.
yes.
In the future.
In the future, yes.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much
your
for having
time.
me on
Of
and
course.
allowing me the space to share my story.
Of course.
That's it for this episode of Unspoken Lives. If today's story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on your own journey, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next powerful conversation. I'm always on the lookout for new guests. If you know someone with a story that deserves to be shared, I'd love to hear from you. Check the show notes for contact details and make sure to follow along on social media at Unspoken Lives Podcast. Until next time, keep listening, keep sharing, and remember, every life has a story worth telling.